This is a Broadcast Devices tutorial.
Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the SWP-300 remote control application software that we developed for Windows. And we're looking at the main screen. And before we get into this, I just want to show you one thing that you need to do to get into this main screen. And then this is an initial connect. So you go in here and you put your IP address information in, the other pertinent information in this column. That's done once. You press connect, and up will come up the unit information, which has some pertinent information like the unit name. If you've given it one, you can give it call letters or a site name. The firmware revisions and the serial number. Of course, this one's saying 0 because this is a pre-production model used for demonstration purposes here at the shop. All right, so let's go into control. This is the RF page, or our summary page, and on it is the facility to monitor two of the BDI DPS-100D power meters over here, and they're placed in the system as shown here on the switch configuration chart. One is for showing the power that's being delivered to either of the antennas, and the other one is for the test load. And then, of course, we added the SWP Macros, which are standard in every SWP-200 and 300 product that we build. And if you are a customer and owner of an SWP-200, you're probably familiar with these. This is where we automate the functionality of the switches and manage the interlocks and transmitter restart and that kind of thing. That's all done for you. That's not a macro you have to write. So we've done that for the switch configurations. We have a couple of other things here. The transmitter status, if you have an external status input from the transmitter to show that they're on. They're both lit here because we have them forced on to show you what they look like when they're lit up. You can put the unit in auto manual, and then there's a fault reset. Now over here we have some presets that you can program yourself. So these are kind of like macros. You can go in and you can set up different things to happen and label the button. These are probably the most commonly used things perhaps, or where you have multiple relays or general purpose inputs or switch management that you want to perform all at one time. That can be programmed into these buttons. Briefly show you that in the setup here in just a moment. The second half of the screen is really a cursory view of all the GPIO of the unit and the relay outputs. So we're monitoring up to 12 analog inputs with this unit. There are 4 in the SWP-300 chassis, and then if you have the IOX24 extender panel, it gives you an additional, we'll give you an additional 8, so you'd have a total of 12. And you can see one of them is actually showing that there's an alarm condition, and we'll go take a look at that in a minute. It's showing that there's something, the transmitter 1 power is, looks like it's over a limit. So we can go check that out over here, and we can see that it's 8.47 kilowatts. And, oh, I'm sorry, that's kilovolts, and we're actually looking at the wrong one. It's the analog input number 3, so it's showing 108.8%, so that needs attention. So the operator can take a look at this and say, oh, I got to go take a look at this. Instead of having to pour through a lot of screens, they can see what's going on right away and then just go zero in on it like so. So you can do that with any of the these indicators. These are the GP outputs. They're all showing that they're in the off state. These can be set for momentary or maintain. We'll show you that in just a bit. The GPIs, same thing. We have on-off conditions. And you can go and take a look at the GPI inputs and see what they actually are and which ones are on or off. And there's the GPOs, just to show you that. That's control of the GPOs. They're all set for momentary at the moment. Relays, and the various things that you can put in here. You can name them, and you can set them up for latched or momentary closure, which we'll show you in the I/O setup. What this is indicating that this was this action was performed recently. This is a momentary, and if you go back to the RF page, you can see that it's showing, hey, relay number 1 was exercised recently here. So I can go and I can clear that. I'm not going to do any harm here because this is a momentary closure for turning the transmitter on. If I simply do that, it is simply going to clear the display. And I can go back here and you can show that it's off now, or the display is cleared. Now, of course, you can set these up for a latched input, and then you want to be careful about doing on or off. But this is just an extra indicator for you. So that's basically the control of the unit. You have the summary page. You can check your analog inputs. You can look at your GPIs. You can control your GPOs and your relays, all with the touch of a mouse click. So just briefly showing you the I/O setup. This is how you go in and you set the unit up. Analog inputs, you can select a channel, put your min max sample voltages in, and the display indications that you want with the units that you want to display. Set your faults up, and then actually I got to show you this. We have a handy test gauge that we developed for the product, and so you put in this is the actual DC voltage that is being applied to the A to D converter of the input of the unit. So that's the DC plate voltage sample here, PAV sample, that's being read. And you'd put that in here, hit set, and then you can take a look at your indication and see if that makes sense based upon what you've put in here. So you can trim this as you need to, and when you're all done, you just quit the test mode and you should be in good shape. So it takes the drudgery out of setting up analog inputs. General purpose inputs, here you can name them and you can set them as to whether they're invert input or not. So what this means is in the default condition, a low going in will light the light, and if you want to set it for a high to light the light, you just do that, and you can do that on a channel by channel basis. Okay, and then on the general purpose outputs, once again you can name them, and you can set them as to whether they're momentary or latch. Of course, momentary is the default, but you can set them for latch by doing that. Let me just show you what happens when you do that. I can go back to the control screen here, go back to RF page, and you see they're all off. But now if I go to a GP out and I do that, and you notice that this changed from what looks like a pulse to a solid bar. So now if I go back in to the RF page here, the summary page, you'll see that that one's on. Okay, and that's kind of how that works. So there's the setup. There are a few other things to look at. You have a logging function, and we're looking at right now we're looking at the room temperature, and that's a graph of the room temperature. It looks like it's been pretty stable, and you can do that in graphical form, and you can do it in a list form, and it shows you what the temperature is. Of course, these are point numbers, but you can put a time and date stamp in here as well. Of course, you can give all of this a file name and copy it to the machine that you're running the app on, but the unit itself at the site is also storing this information and sending this information out periodically as you set up. And let's see, what else have we got left to show you here? On the Automate page, this is how you set up those macros that we were talking about, or the presets. You can pick a button and you can give it a name. And you can go in and you can set up, you can go in and set up relays. Right, on this one it looks like we have 1, 3, 5, and 7 turning on at the same time. And so that one button for button number 1, which is auxiliary antenna ops, will close those relays at the same time. And they'll all be momentary closures because you set that up over on the relay setup page. And that's all you do. So setting this unit up takes a very, very short amount of time. We made it as easy as possible, no complicated software to have to learn and memorize anything. It's all done for you very, very simply with these tabs. And that's the whole app. So we hope you take a look at the SWP-300. We think it's an important product. Some other things that we've got to mention here. First of all, everything that's going on here is operating via SNMP. All SWP-300s, all SWP-200s, our power meters, the DPS-100D series, and even our audio toolbox series like the ATB-300 and the GPM-300 are all SNMP agent devices, which means there are MIBs published for each product, which also means that not only can you use BDI's graphical user interface to operate and control and monitor your product, but you can use third-party software that's SNMP compatible and third-party remote control systems that are SNMP compatible. So even if the SWP-300 doesn't look right for your operation, maybe you need more of something that a more expensive remote control system might provide, the SWP-300 can still act as a peripheral device for that larger system, a subsystem of the larger system, to doing things like switch control and monitoring power and doing all this other GPIO stuff and control stuff. So you have a remote control within a remote control in that scenario. But this product's really been designed and targeted for the budget-conscious broadcaster. It's a medium-priced product. It's somewhere in the middle of all the remote control products. The SWP-300-2T, the list price is $31.95, $3,195, and the 1T is $29.95. So it's really a feature-packed unit for the price point. So we think this is something that's been needed in the marketplace, and that's why we wanted to bring it to you. So for more information about applications and configuration for your operations, certainly contact us here at Broadcast Devices. So hopefully you've enjoyed this brief introduction to the SWP-300 series remote control from BDI, and thanks for watching.
Quality products, quality service, and quality solutions from Broadcast Devices.